I'm Bruce McFerrin, Ohio State's Vice President for Agriculture and Dean of the College of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Sciences. This is a unique event for us because we have some unique things happening at this university. Most of the people in the room have heard me talk about something called discovery themes at one of the presentations over the past almost 3 years now that I've been here at Ohio State with you. The discovery themes are particularly important to me. It's getting very resonant here. The discovery themes are particularly important to me because one of the main reasons that I have been here for 3 years is because Ohio State was adventuring into the territory of proposing to tackle critical issues in today's society. Now, when I first talked to Gordon Gee about the discovery themes, he said, these discovery theme things, it's all about energy and environment, health and wellness, and food production and security. And I had to ask him to repeat himself, which is, I learned something you don't do very often with Gordon Gee. He wants it the first time. Because I thought that I had misunderstood, and he was talking about the opportunities within the College of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Sciences, because those subjects are so aligned with what we do in the college. But when we got the clarification that this was the university mobilizing to address the issues that we're all about every morning when we wake up, and that to do that, we were going to create an interdisciplinary culture that spanned the entire university. And to do that, we were going to bring in new faculty over a period of time to increase the capacity of the excellence that we already had in our faculty ranks. This really was just too good an opportunity to let pass. Well, here we are almost 3 years later. It's been a lot of heavy lifting in the interim. A lot of heavy lifting by the faculty, because what do you do if your discovery theme is health and wellness? That's relatively broad in my book. How do we bring that down to earth and create something where we can actually define some tangible goals, something that we could achieve over a reasonable amount of time and have impact on those societal issues? We tackled this by asking Ohio State's faculty to tell us the definition of those 3 discovery themes. And over 1,000 faculty responded by giving us nearly 50 proposals on exactly that problem. How these things really align with programs and issues that we could address, things that we could attack, places where we could hang our hat at the end of the day and say we made a difference. We actually went through a process of not just deciding within the academy, but bringing people from outside to talk about those initiatives. And at the end of the day, we've now ended up with 8 areas that we're supporting at the university level. One of them spans all of the issues, because when we did our initial fact-finding of what constitutes these 3 areas, we discovered there were a few things that were really very much overarching. And one of the things that aligned very nicely with an undergraduate initiative we'd already established was to tackle the question of big data. Now, you know what big data is, right? It's the little voice on your dashboard that got you here. It's the reason that when you scan your shopper's card at the grocery store, those coupons are actually things you were going to buy the next time you came here. You know, we're surrounded by big data. And in our areas in the college, they certainly are incredibly important. So Ohio State did an environmental scan and actually determined that, there are lots of really good universities tackling the issues of big data, data analytics. Where's our space? Well, we decided we were going to address translational elements of data analytics, problem solving using big data. And so one of the really exciting initiatives in which we're engaged is precision agriculture. I meant to give them the picture to flash up here. I tweeted it out. We had a news release. If you haven't seen it, go back and and check the CFAES news feed over the past several weeks, out near Farm Science Review, we have a block O of corn. Okay, that's really cute. You know, you got an aerial picture here, and there's this big block O in a cornfield. You know, we've been talking about crop circles for years. What's so big about this one? Well, if you're not really paying attention at the grocery store as to the starting point of that food, you know, there's a huge amount of technology now involved in producing our food. And so that cute block O picture was actually produced with real useful technology. New planters that actually hold multiple seed hybrids, so that as you go through the field, the big data can inform that system, the tractor and planter, which particular hybrid to plant at which point during its pass through the field. So if you have a light soil and a heavy soil, you might want different hybrids in that same field in order to really maximize yield. You know, we just tweaked that technology to do something a little cute. But we're in the process now of investing in precision agriculture through the Data Analytics Initiative. There's an initiative that's just forming in our arts and humanities community here at Ohio State, a really critical area. That is an important part of making our students well-rounded students, and there's incredible scholarship with that. So those two are relatively overarching. Then within each of those three initial topic areas, health and wellness, energy and environment, food production and security, we defined 2 initiatives in each of those areas. So in health and wellness, we have an initiative in emerging diseases, which involves our college. Kathy Smith is the program director. I keep forgetting what we call that level of people. It's the executive director, program director in that emerging disease area. The lead is over in the College of Veterinary Medicine, but we're investing in faculty positions in our college there. The other health and wellness issue is chronic brain injury, the only one of these initiatives that doesn't directly affect our college in some way. In energy and environment, the 2 programs ended up related to materials. And so we have one initiative that is funded to look at the materials themselves, and we're involved in that. In fact, just last night I was at dinner in Worcester where we were meeting with a number of executives from Ohio's tire companies. So we had Cooper there, Goodyear and Bridgestone are other partners. Ford Motor Company has become a partner. We're working on growing latex and making rubber out of dandelion roots. We have other initiatives ongoing. We're actually bringing new faculty into the college around that materials initiative. In a moment, you'll hear from the lead faculty member on our other initiatives, so I won't say too much about it, other than that it is to look at the sustainability of systems like this. Just because you can make corn-based ethanol or biodiesel from soy or rubber from dandelions, is it in fact better? Is it more sustainable? Will it last into the future? Will it solve our problems? What problems might it create? Our job is to look at this from 360 degrees and really understand it, but Elena will give you more information on that. The final area then is food production and security. And those 2 initiatives are both led out of our college. And so you'll hear from Steve Schwartz on the area of connecting our food more directly to our individual ways that we interact with disease processes and the things we eat, and understanding environmental impacts in our bodies on curing and preventing diseases. And then you'll hear also from Casey Hoy, who leads the 8th of these initiatives, talking about a resilient food system. How do we begin to look at our food system in a different way and understand how we put all of the different pieces together that we have to feed what you've heard us saying, 9 billion by 2050. The Economist has just come out with a prediction of 11 billion, where by 2050, India passes China, Nigeria passes the United States, in terms of world population. And in this population increase, you have an incredible increase in the number of people that are in the middle class and demanding a different sort of food supply, animal protein and the like. And so we really have a lot of questions to deal with as we look to the future of how we interact with our food. 8 initiatives. We're clearly involved in 6, and I think we'll be in the arts and humanities when it stands up because we have some interesting connections there. 3 of the initiatives here at Ohio State are led by our faculty here in the college. So this really has developed into an incredible opportunity for us. We currently have 15 new positions that we're actively seeking that came from these discovery theme opportunities. And there's new money coming into the college from the university level to help support this. Another defining difference between what we do and what our peers around the country are able to do. And so as we look at this over the next 3 to 4 years, we expect that the discovery themes will actually enable us to increase our faculty base by about 20%. And we'll continue to support a lot of the core areas that we've worked on historically, and we'll be able to add focus to some very key problems that are absolutely essential for the future of our society. With that, having talked through most of the hour, thank you very much. No. We'll stop and get on with the stars of the show. Do I know who's going first here? Elena? Casey, you're going first. We don't want to get out of order with the slides here. Let me introduce Casey Hoy, who is the Kellogg Endowed Chair in Agricultural Ecosystems Management. He is a colleague and friend of mine in the Department of Entomology. You can never have too many entomologists is my motto. I'm working on the other 2. We'll work on this. Casey?
We're pretty excited and passionate about the work that lays before us in these initiatives, and we're looking forward to engaging folks like you in this work as well. Can you see these slides okay? Okay. So we have a title slide that includes both Alina's and Joseph's initiative in mind because we both focus on this concept of sustainability and resilience. In our case, in food and agriculture, and in Alina's case, they cast it as sustainable and resilient economy and materials, but we know agriculture is involved across that, and we know really food and energy and water and materials are very intertwined. So our 2 initiatives work together quite a bit. And I think you'll see that as we transition from my description to Alina's. Sustainability is all about how we can continue to live the way we live on into the future, the capacity to use the earth in ways that will both meet our current needs and in the ways we're using it will last into the future, maintain the way our planet supports life on Earth, and to reduce poverty. There's a part of this that's about all of us being able to live on into the future. So that's kind of a way of continuing the way we live now. The thing is that there are times, and we've seen this in the past, there are times when the environment changes quite a bit. And when that happens, you also need an ability to adapt. And that's the concept of resilience, the capacity to survive and adapt and flourish despite turbulent change. And we've all experienced turbulent change in our lifetime where whether it's a new disruptive technology or massive political change in the landscape, we know that we do have to change and adapt and continue to flourish as a result or after that. Here's something that we need to take care of. This chart kind of sums up what's going on in food security in the United States. We think about food insecurity as something that happens in other parts of the world. And it's true, if you look at the global population, it's 1 in 9 people on the planet who are chronically undernourished. That's now. And that's not a good thing. And you figure, well, that's in developing countries, and most of that statistic is in developing countries. But here in Ohio, in the United States, the rates of household food insecurity, and this is from the Economic Research Service, are about 14.3%. So that's 1 in 7 of our neighbors are food insecure, meaning at times They don't have what they need in the pantry to make the next meal. It's higher for children, 1 in 4 children in Ohio. Dr. McPherron used in his commencement speech the other day the kind of visual of what this means. It's enough to fill Ohio Stadium with hungry children 6 times and then still have a line out the door. That's something that we need to change. And it's not because we're not producing enough. Our farmers are incredibly productive. We produce, the statistics are and the assessments are that we produce enough food to meet the caloric requirements of everyone on the planet and then some. And yet we still have this. So that's why we think about it as a transformation that's needed. We need to transform this kind of picture. These are some of the basics of our initiative. In fact, the Initiative for Food and Agricultural Transformation. So some of the ideas are that we create models of climate resilient, secure, equitable agriculture and food systems that we can share elsewhere and that we can learn from elsewhere to keep improving those models. We thought about using our campus lands as living laboratories and giving our students the opportunity to work more and experience food and agriculture as part of their daily life. When I put out the call, it was a little over a year ago when these requests for proposals came up, and I put out a call to the faculty that we knew across the university and asked if anybody would be interested in getting together and talking about this issue. What was gratifying is that a lot of people from across the university came to the table. And it was a very interesting and even mix across the humanities, the sciences and engineering, the life sciences. And that very large and diverse group is what led to our proposal. And I think you'll see that as we go along. So it's kind of an even mix of the many parts of the university that's coming to this issue. We'd also like to engage our partners outside of the university, and that of course includes folks like you, to seek transformative solution. It starts with hiring about 30 new faculty. And that's a tremendous influx of energy and capability into Ohio State University. Don't try to read what's in the boxes. This is the diagram of what we expect as a network that was result from those 30 new faculty. So this ring in the center, those are all the new faculty hires. These are all of our departments and colleges down here. Those are interdisciplinary programs. These are the other discovery themes, and these are our partners outside of the university, and all of those lines are what we expect to happen as those new faculty come to town, to knit all those programs, departments, colleges, partners together in new ways that give us new capabilities to address this massive challenge. So here are the broad areas that we're going to be hiring in, and you see they're as diverse as the faculty that came to the table. So there's a set of positions in the area of culture, art, and design, because this is about changing the culture around food as well as the scientific technology of producing it and continuing to produce the way we can now. There's one position that's in play right now and offers out in sustainability and diverse indigenous food systems. So what were people eating here before Europeans arrived in Ohio? There are a lot of food plants that we don't necessarily use anymore. Maybe we should be using those. So we're asking very broad questions in this initiative. That's just one example. There's the climate change in food prediction. We know that weather patterns are certainly changing. They're getting more challenging, and that's something that we're going to have to continue to contend with. So this is where the precision agriculture that Bruce mentioned is. It's things like water security for food production. Food is health, so it's health and nutrition. There are several positions there, and that links us over to the medical school. That's also our very direct tie to the program that Steve Schwartz will be talking about a little bit later, because this is kind of doing some of the things that they're doing at a very individual level and taking it out to a population and community level. And then there's a very strong policy piece. That's a big part of how food systems work. And there's an entrepreneurship and business ecosystems piece, because the transformation is something that entrepreneurship and economic development certainly has a role in. So that's a broad overview of the areas that we're hiring in. There are just 5 positions that we have searches going for now, and those are the ones up here. But everything else in yellow in that big network diagram are the linkages that those first 5 positions will make. So it's just 5 positions, but there are 23 departments and colleges that'll be woven together as a result of having that new expertise. Here are some of the areas that are emerging that we're working in. So I mentioned climate, environment, and ecosystems. Here's some of the predictions for climate change in our region. This is increase in heavy rain events, and where it's darker, there's more heavy rain events. This is increase in number of consecutive dry days. So it's going to get wetter when it's wet and drier when it's dry. And what there's very little data or good consensus on is what's the pattern, where you go back and forth. And we know that's tough to deal with in agriculture. So coming up with a way of continuing to produce with those kinds of challenges in weather patterns is part of what we're looking at. New food economies. This is from friends down in Athens who are working on local production of staple grains, corn and beans and things like that. This is an example of the kind of economic opportunity that we have in Ohio. Very diverse agriculture, a very diverse state, and we could be producing many more different kinds of foods and products and let economic development drive this transformation. New food cultures on campus and within the community. We have a very diverse community here at The Ohio State University and in Columbus. That's actually the Columbus Public Health Market right here downtown. So how do we transform and engage our community in this transformation of making sure that those statistics on food insecurity get reduced? And finally, the connection with our gateways in other parts of the world. This is something that we want to be able to share the models that we're coming up with elsewhere. And food systems look very different in other parts of the world. There may be things that we can learn from what they know in these other places, and also things that we can teach and help them with. So just one example as kind of a transition to Alina's project of this idea of economic development and how it can create very beneficial connections between a number of businesses. This is from a project that we had worked on a few years ago up in Northeast Ohio, funded by the Fund for Our Economic Future. Abby Turner was on our advisory committee for that project. And unfortunately, this never actually came to pass, but it was a really good idea, and it's waiting out there, and I'm waiting for somebody to take this up. So there's a very large dairy farm. They needed to deal with a manure issue. The idea that they were going to put in place was this biodigester, which would take care of their manure issue. What it produces is heat and methane. It's a dairy farm. He's got cows. He doesn't need more heat and methane. But there was a small vegetable grower down the road who was interested in siting a greenhouse next to the biodigester. He could use the heat and methane to produce vegetables all winter. Already had a contract with the local school system who would buy the vegetables and wanted more of a local supply during the winter. They were willing to collect their food scraps and send it back to the biodigester and create energy out of those food scraps. So it's a good example of that kind of circular flow where one operation's waste becomes the next one's raw materials. And that's one that's part of central to the ideas that are part of our initiative as well as Alina's. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Alina for Sustainable and Resilient Economy.
So the goal of our program, our Discovery Themes program, it's called Sustainable and Resilient Economy. And our mission is to accelerate the development of sustainable and resilient production and consumption systems, what we call the economy, that enhance the value and reduce the adverse impacts of global materials and energy flows. So we are really trying to advance the science, the research, the innovation, the technology, development, but also the learning and teaching, the engagement and the outreach that's needed to make our economy more sustainable and more resilient. So what do we mean by that? If you think about how things work now, and this is obviously a gross generalization, but you can generally say that it's true that our economy follows this mostly linear system in the sense that we extract resources from the earth or from the soil, from the water, from whatever feedstock that's coming from chemicals. We process those. We bring them into manufacturing, our production facilities, we distribute them. This leads to a very complex set of supply chain networks, ultimately leading to final goods and services that are consumed by all of us, and maybe consumed for a second, maybe consumed for an hour, maybe consumed for a day, a year, a decade, even 100 years, but many of which then ultimately end up in some form of waste or disposal. That's what we mean by linear system. And the example that Casey just gave you is a great example of a transformation to a more circular or closed loop economy. Why is that important? Well, first of all, before I get to that, let me say that our linear economy has had tremendous benefits, and we don't want to lose sight of that. We have had tremendous resource efficiency gains through technological innovation and progress. You just have to look at, for example, innovations in energy efficiency, in fuel efficiency, and lighting efficiency. Okay, back in the 1700s, we would be sitting around with tallow candles right now, or soon, relying on the light from outside coming in. We've had hundreds and hundreds folds worth of increases in our efficiency with which we are translating our energy resources into lumens in that case. So the technological progress has been tremendous. It's also fueled tremendous economic growth. Economic growth has brought tremendous prosperity to many people. Not everybody, but to many. You look at how average GDP has changed across the world. In 1960, it was about an average of $500 a day. We're up to over an average of $10,000 a day, averaged across all people. You look at gains in terms of the percentage of people that were in really extreme, what's called extreme poverty. So living on $1 a day, maybe $2 a day. That's dropped precipitously just within the last 50 years. You look at global average life expectancies, that's gone up tremendously. So we've had tremendous gains through this very highly efficient economy of ours. Where are we missing the mark? Well, on the equity side to some extent, right? We still have about a sixth of our global population that lives in extreme poverty. We've got to do something about that. And that's part of this idea of sustainability, as Casey said, is to bring a more equitable distribution. But we also are facing real environmental constraints. And there's two of them. There's on the resource extraction side, right? We ultimately live on a planet with limited finite resources. Some of them are non-renewable, some of them are renewable, but even the renewable ones have rates of renewability that are limited. And we also have limits on the other side, on this side, the waste side. So the limits to our ability of these environmental systems to absorb the waste, to absorb the pollution and absorb the impacts. There's a concept that has been developed over the last few years called planetary boundaries. And the idea is that we have so much breathing room and operating room in license in which to operate our economy. And if we get to these boundaries, these maximum limits of environmental systems, whether it's in terms of the ability of our atmosphere to absorb emissions such as CO2, carbon dioxide emissions, and other greenhouse gas emissions, whether it's the ability of our freshwater systems to absorb impacts in terms of nutrients and other sedimentation and other impacts, or whether it's the loss of biodiversity that kind of that provides a support for many things. There are limits to what these impacts can be. And so all of this provides us with good rationale for trying to seek a more circular economy. So far this sounds kind of technical. It sounds like maybe we just need technical solutions. Well, as the dean emphasized, it really goes thinking about sustainability and resilience goes well beyond technical solutions. So let's take an example. Take an example of many of the new technologies that are being talked about in terms of solutions for personal mobility. So ways that we can make cars more sustainable. Well, there's lightweighting of materials, right? So if you make the car lighter, it requires less fuel to push it along, and so we have great gains in fuel efficiency. Bio-derived fuels from agricultural waste products or agricultural crops. Carbon capture and reuse, bio-rubber, which the dean mentioned, in terms of tire production and other production that may enter the car. Reuse of scrap tires, alternative energy for vehicle charging, alternative fuel cells, hydrogen fuel cells, for example, and the list goes on. By the way, many of these technologies are being innovated right here at Ohio State. For example, we have the queen of biorubber in our college, Katrina Cornish. The question then is, okay, we can innovate these technological solutions, and we absolutely need to. But what is the broader impacts of these? So if we think about now thinking a little bit beyond just the technology itself, what are the other things that we have to consider? We have to consider, how does this technology scale up to industrial level processes? What are the challenges there? Well, we need new manufacturing facilities or retrofit our existing manufacturing facilities. Where are the incentives for firms to invest in that? Sometimes and oftentimes they're not there. What about from the consumer side? Are these new technologies going to be affordable? Oftentimes not, because they're a small niche market, which means they're not the economies of scale yet in terms of production, and so they're high cost. What about consumer acceptance? So for example, in terms of lightweighting, there's a perception there among some that those are less safe materials because they're lighter and somehow less safe in terms of crashing. So these consumer acceptance issues, whether perceived or real, are real in terms of their impact on markets. Of course, policy and regulations and other consumer behaviors, such as other transportations that they might make, ultimately affect the market for these kinds of new technologies. If we think even broader, at what we would call more systems level, we think about the availability of some of the inputs that go into this car. For example, cars with batteries that rely on lithium, which is a rare earth material that is very scarce in terms of its supply globally. Or supply chain disruptions in terms of the bio-based fuels competition for land and other agricultural resources. We need a lot of land to grow the kinds of agricultural commodities that might ultimately be used for biofuels. And even on the consumer side, thinking from a more feedback or systems-based approach, how might consumers respond to greater fuel efficiency? Well, from my point of view, that means that it's cheaper for me to drive a mile. If it's cheaper for me to drive a mile, hey, I'm going to do more of it. The price is lower, I'm going to demand more. And so what does that imply if all of a sudden people are driving a lot more because now it's cheaper to drive? So these are the kinds of what we would call system level interactions or feedbacks that we're really interested in trying to get a handle on and trying to understand, and that's really one of the central goals of our program. Just to give you a little bit more in terms of the conceptual framework that we're thinking about here, if you start with the economy, you think about different forms of capital that are produced by the economy. Well, the economy uses financial capital, and it produces what you could broadly call manufactured capital, right? So cars are an example of manufactured capital. But how does that then connect to other pieces of our society and our environment? Well, there's a greater society that produces human capital, the people that work at the firms. It also produces many other things that we broadly might refer to as social capital, the relationships that we have with others. All of that feeds into the economy in terms of its production and its how it works. But even broader within that, we have the environment, and we have different forms of natural capital. Natural capital are in terms of natural resources that are being extracted and used in the economy, as well as other kinds of what we call ecosystem services. So the clean air that we breathe, the clean water that we drink, the beautiful lakes that we observe, etc. And these ecosystem services are also inputs either on the production side or the consumption side. And so all of this together, thinking about these different forms of capital, financial capital, manufactured capital, human capital, social capital, natural capital, give us this very comprehensive and integrated framework, because if we can understand how a new technology or new policy will influence these different forms of capital and how they interact and how they depend on each other, then we can start to understand how that new technology will impact sustainability and impact resilience, because the goal of sustainability is to maintain these different forms of capital through time. The goal of a resilient economy is to maintain these capital stocks so that we are resilient. And in fact, we know, for example, that communities that are hit with hardship, whether it's economic or natural disaster, are more resilient if they have higher levels of social capital. All right, let me skip to the last slide, which is the bubble slide. Casey and I like bubbles. This shows you just some of the areas in which we are doing hiring. Just like Casey outlined for you, we are also engaged in some aggressive hiring as part of our initiative. And we're also engaging existing faculty as well. And so some of the areas that are emerging in terms of our focus as we seek to build this integrated approach to sustainability and resilience include integrated modelers. So these are people who literally will help us model, develop quantitative, database, big data, computer numerical-based models of the kind of system that I was describing. We also have people on the human side that are looking at, for example, helping us to better understand human behaviors. How do people respond to green marketing, or how do people respond to other kinds of innovations? Sometimes those are unintended and unanticipated responses. Governance, of course, in terms of understanding policy and governance approaches. And then well-being is really our link to more of the humanities to help us understand and frame what is it that we even mean by sustainability and resilience. And then we also are looking at environmental systems, of course, agricultural systems, and you can see that we're doing significant hiring there, as well as urban systems, and then a foundation in terms of understanding better the properties of more sustainable materials. So at that point, I think I will conclude and turn it over to Steve.
I'm very pleased to have an opportunity to share with you our interest in this initiative on personalized food and nutritional metabolic profiling to improve health. And we're really trying to address a compelling challenge to study how chronic diseases can be preventable through diet and dietary interventions. We know that diet and disease are quite related. However, in order to come up with some really effective dietary recommendations to prevent disease and improve health, it's quite difficult to develop because we're all very different and there's so much variability that occurs between individuals. And our approach to this problem is to try to utilize this personalized profiling, metabolic profiling, to study the variability and what really determines how each of us are different. We all have these unique signatures of metabolites that are circulating in our bodies and in our tissues, and we want to try to study those and reflect that reflects the metabolic response to dietary interventions. Then we can identify biomarkers that are signatures of a healthy state of individuals and also disease subtypes, and come up with scientifically sound messages for consumers and public health messages for dietary recommendations to prevent disease and improve health. And this is the field of metabolic profiling, and it involves the study, this whole new science here of metabolomics. And metabolomics is the study of all of these metabolites that are circulating in humans. And metabolomics is today where genomics was 20, 15 years ago. So it's this emerging discipline that involves the systematic study of metabolite patterns, the products of all those pathways and biochemical processes that occur within individuals that are really affected by our genetic makeup, but largely influenced by environmental factors, such as the diet. What do we consume every day? So our focus is to really fill this gap of expertise that's needed here on campus, raise the stature of the university to establish one of the premier programs with capabilities to study metabolic profiling in this area of metabolomics. As you know, these discovery theme initiatives are going to support attracting new faculty members, outstanding students and scientists for research, learning, and outreach opportunities. And we already have very strong omics disciplines on campus here in genomics and transcriptomics, and we couple this with metabolomics, we'll have this wonderful study of systems biology that can really address some of these challenging problems related to food, biomedicine, and health. We're going to be partnering, as you heard from some of the others, with some external organizations for competitive external dollars. USDA and the National Institute of Health are quite interested in funding this area. We have a number of relationships with industry partners, and we plan to build upon those, such as with Abbott, Nestle, Unilever. We have a nice relationship with Agilent Technologies and helping us build some platforms for metabolomic studies. And we plan to engage our National Science Foundation Industry University Cooperative Research Center, which already involves about 11 different companies from the food processing area. As I mentioned, we have a very strong multidisciplinary team working in the Foods for Health area, already established, and we plan to bring in the new faculty members that we're recruiting and have them collaborate with these existing investigators across campus, especially through our research center in functional foods research and entrepreneurship, with the comprehensive cancer centers, molecular carcinogenesis, and chemoprevention program. And we have a shared resource with our college and Food, Ag, Environmental Sciences and the College of Medicine on nutrient and phytochemical analytics, where we can build these metabolomic platforms for these studies. One of the most unique aspects about Ohio State University, and one of the attracting influences that brought me here, was that there's a world-class College of Food, Ag, Environmental Sciences and a College of Medicine within the same campus boundary. And you can count on one hand the number of institutions in the nation that have that advantage, medicine and agriculture, on the same campus. So just wonderful opportunities for faculty to work together, for students to interact, move from laboratory to laboratory, and develop a wonderful training opportunity for students and scientists on this campus. Another important aspect is that our College of Medicine has one of the few National Cancer Institute designated comprehensive cancer centers, and that's a big deal. And I think you all know about the new James Hospital and Research Institute. So we're very happy to have collaborators in that field that are willing to work with us. So our team leaders and the new hires will be primarily from 3 different colleges, Food, Ag, Environmental Sciences. My good colleague Steve Clinton is one of the leaders in the College of Medicine and the Comprehensive Cancer Center from the Molecular Carcinogenesis and Chemoprevention Group, and Mark Failla from the College of Education and Human Ecology, where human sciences and human nutrition's located. And we're involving a number of other colleges, part of our team members in arts and sciences, dentistry, public health, and pharmacy. So our plan, we're a little smaller than some of the other initiatives. We're looking for about 15 plus new hires, targeting a blend of some senior investigators and new junior faculty members to bring to this campus. And I thought I would provide just a few examples to give you a flavor of the type of research that we're going to be focusing on. So we're looking for experts in food lipids, fats, and oils, and that's really to target the cardiovascular field and cardiovascular health. So food interventions in cardiovascular disease and prevention. This overlaps with the whole field of lipidomics, which is a science in itself, but a subdiscipline of metabolomics. We're actively engaged right now advertising for nutrition scientists in interest in exercise, health, and chronic disease. And this brings us to the obesity area, type 2 diabetes, and metabolic syndrome, in a study of the human metabolome, which is still yet undefined. So this needs to be a lot of work done in this area. Dr. McFerrin made a reference to data analytics and big data, and we'll be partnering with data analytics for experts in metabolomics and informatics. We just finished an interview with a few individuals, food scientists experienced in dairy foods and health, to study dairy lipids, health, and flavors. We're seeking a clinical scientist that might lead some food intervention studies in the gastrointestinal area, gastrointestinal disorders such as celiac disease, irritable bowel syndrome, and the whole emerging field of how food and food consumption influence the gut microbiome. And lastly, we'll be adding faculty with interest in identifying biomarkers and signatures of cancer development and prevention. And that's to build upon our strength already in the foods for cancer prevention area. Just the last slide here, our plan. We're going to be fostering these collaborations with seed grants funds from the Discovery Theme Initiative, sharing graduate students, postdoctoral researchers, establishing some state-of-the-art facilities. We have a real need for purchasing new equipment to train young scientists and students in the field, conducting workshops and holding seminars, fostering some additional collaborations with industry and interested stakeholders, really with this goal of establishing Ohio State University as one of the leading institutions in the nation here in this emerging field of personalized food and nutritional metabolomics for health. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention.
You heard some of the stuff. I love the bubbles. We got 2 bubbles, 1 no bubble, and so you sort of get a flavor. If you take away anything, take away 2 ideas from this. One is we're out to tackle some of the most significant issues that face the future. And the second thing is we're doing it by taking full advantage of this incredible university. There are very, very few institutions in the world that have the capacity of the Ohio State University. But I want to bring it back down to you. Meet Cooper. Cooper's my grandson, in full disclosure. He's about to turn 6 months old. We're doing this for Cooper and the millions of other people that will grow up with Cooper. Try to think about this. I mean, we're thinking about some new things, and we're talking about, dealing with equitable distribution of food. And well, golly, does that get in the way of our mentality about encouraging agriculture and making money from this? No, not at all. In fact, it's a way of ensuring that we have more stability to that system to develop that system. Our world has changed, and it's going to continue to change. Explain FaceTime to your grandfather. The world has changed, folks. It's changed incredibly in our lifetime. It is racing past. It is racing past, and it's not just technology. It's the entire social fabric that supports that technology. I just had an intriguing conversation, again, with some folks about genetically modified crops. We actually can demonstrate from genetically modified crops an environmental benefit. There are attributes to those crops that are demonstrably supportive of our environment. We can talk about those from an economic perspective. Where we stumbled was ignoring the fact that there's a social component to acceptance of that and sustainability. And so we kind of rushed forward without really thinking about whether the people around us are going to buy into this. I'm a scientist. Of course they would. The scientific evidence is clear. Well, I have discovered that my science doesn't convince everyone. And so you have to think this in a much more complicated way. And I think you heard our faculty talking about the complexity with which we're trying to approach these questions. We have an incredible luxury in this college, an incredible luxury. We're still hiring faculty in things like animal nutrition. We're still hiring extension educators in our counties around Ohio. We're still hiring foresters and farm economists. We're still hiring people who are the best teachers in the world to really communicate to that next generation that are going to be problem solving. And we're now hiring people in clusters of expertise that will help us tackle some of the world's most critical issues. How do we ensure that we have stable societies around the world so that our own food system is even more stable because of that global stability? How do we ensure that people here at home, you may have seen this, those of you who live locally, think back a couple of months, there was a picture of Columbus in the Columbus Dispatch, and it showed the zip codes of Columbus. You can start any place on I-270 and drive in a diagonal through downtown to the other side, and you will cross 20 years in expected lifespan. How is that? Well, we're addressing some of those systems that some of the issues that underlie that kind of question. And so the great news is that we get to continue to invest in the things that the world relies on us to do. Discovering new knowledge in our food system, broadly defined, educating the next generation, taking solutions to communities around Ohio and beyond. And we also have the ability to focus on some key issues and take those faculty that already work with us and add to that expertise through this approach. I find that incredibly invigorating. This is something that I wake up thinking about in the morning and I go to bed dreaming about at night. It is an incredible opportunity that is not afforded to our competitors. We will have the best people in the world working here. And our charge to you today is, take away some of this enthusiasm, take away questions that you might have, ideas that you could feed back to us. Be our disciples. Spread this information broadly to people you talk to. Get them interested in what we're accomplishing here at Ohio State, because we will literally change the world. Got takeaways for you. There's plenty more food. Delighted to have you join us here today. Remember Cooper, we're doing this for him. And let's give one more round of applause to our faculty for leading us through. Thanks, everybody.